Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Here we are back with chapter 13 talking about media. Um, and we're going to specifically look at more traditional media, newspapers, magazines, TV, and radio. So here we go. Framework for chapter 13. Again, I apologize that you can't read that, but we're in part 4 talking about the media process, and we're going to talk about newspapers, magazines, TV, radio, and planning considerations. You should be able to see that though in your, see if that helps. Nope. Okay. So looking at the, first look at the Absolute Vodka ad and really what a success they made, blending traditional media with digital media. And really one of the keys to their success was this idea of consistency. It did not have a very good reputation in the beginning. Absolute Vodka, bartenders found it difficult to hang on to. They didn't think that there was vodka coming from um, Scandinavia. Would People didn't believe that it was any good, all that kind of thing. But they went ahead and they did this very successful campaign, um, and through the use of, as I said, consistency, the ad would always start out, absolute sunshine or absolute radiance or absolute fun, whatever. Um, but by combining everything and doing this integrated brand promotion across different platforms, it became very successful. And they still hold this method to today. Okay, so let's talk about the present and future of traditional media, which would be, as I said, newspapers and magazines. And there are certain things that can only be achieved through more traditional methods. So we're going to talk about that. But the goal really is to blend traditional and new media or digital media. So digital media, social media, it offers a different opportunity. It's extremely cost effective. We'll talk about that again. A cost effective way to reach your target markets. And also, it's easy to quick to change. And most traditional media is now transferring to be um, share what's on traditional media also through digital media. So, um, where you choose to advertise, which media you choose to advertise is super important because that's your best method to reach your target audience. And it's also very important that you choose the right media to find those audiences because so much money is spent on it. All right, so there are some advantages to newspapers and digital papers. The big one is that there's geographic selectivity. So, for example, the New York Times, the New York papers are going to reach Metro New York, Metro New York City. Buffalo paper is going to reach Metro Buffalo, New York. Um, a, a newspaper from the Midwest will reach Midwestern customers. So, that's very important. The other idea it's significant with newspapers is this idea of timeliness, that they come out every day, or most of them are once a day. Many are becoming once a week, or a couple times a week, not necessarily every day, but you can get information out pretty quickly. There's a lot of creative opportunities with it. There's credibility with newspapers that people still feel a large amount of credibility with print media. Um, there's an interest. There's a the audience is interested, and it's relatively low cost as compared to magazines and television. So the disadvantage is really there's a limited segmentation. The idea that you can hit geographic, in terms of demographics, you can reach a specific geographic area, but people of all psychographic profiles and behavioral profiles will be reached with with newspaper, which is not necessarily, you might be advertising to part of your target market, but not all of your target market. There are some creative constraints. There's no sound. Super duper cluttered. Oh my goodness, so much stuff in newspapers to look at in terms of competition with other ads, articles, easy to cross, so easy to just glaze over an ad unless it really grabs your attention. And it does have a short life. This idea that newspapers and magazines only are newspapers are only have a 24-hour lifespan. So there's a couple of different types of advertising that we're going to talk about, four specifically. One is display advertising, that is an ad, I guess really just three. So display advertising, that's set apart from the articles in the paper. It can either be a straight ad purchased by one organization, say Wegmans, or it could be a co-op ad that is joined both by Wegmans and say Häagen-Dazs or Purina or Kellogg's or whatever, and the manufacturer, the producer would pay for part of it, and then the retailer would pay for part of it. So those are display ads. And then there's also inserts that we'll see you'll see them in the Sunday paper. You'll also see, and on Black Friday, you'll see a lot of inserts. Certain holidays, there'll be inserts, ads that you'll see tucked into the paper from Target or CVS or Rite Aid or whatever it may be. And then classified advertising. So, and consumers often have a choice in content delivery with newspapers, so there's a little bit of self-selection there, which can be helpful. Example, the New York Times. Okay, so we need to think about what's going to happen with newspapers going forward. And they've certainly, it's sort of stabled out a little bit, but leveled out a little bit in terms of readership, but they saw a big decline just in terms of the advent of digital newspapers and digitized. So in order to compete in the future, newspapers are going to have to really kind of up their game with their coverage of local issues, and while also providing information about national and international news. And this idea of pay for inquiry advertising. So if someone clicked on your ad, then the advertiser will have to pay. And then it's also important that you provide follow-up to news stories that you might run so that people will continue to read the paper. And also giving people the opportunity to actually shop through the ad itself. Okay, so magazines have certainly had had significant decline, and people are switching over and reading them online more. Readership also has stabilized, but it's growing through digital devices, and people need to jump on that. Marketers need to jump on that. So, and it's important again that just as newspapers, that magazines sort of adapt to new media options in terms of online, and again making the products advertised in the digital ads available for purchase immediately, so you don't lose interest. So it's just an example, two different magazines, one for fly fishing, one for special interests. This is an ad for Car and Driver magazine. So it's really easy to target and reach your desired audience due to special interest. And it can be also fashion magazines or health magazines. So with magazines' advantages, very audience selective. The audience has a lot of interest in it. There's creative opportunities in terms of the images and the copy layout. And there's also, magazines, generally speaking, have pretty long life because they get passed on. There are some disadvantages to it that magazines usually come out on a monthly basis. So it's there's a long lead times on that, a tremendous amount of clutter with other ads and articles. You might have a difficulty reaching as many people as you want to, and also catching with the frequency, the exposure that they would have to it. We know that it's important for an ad to be seen on repeated occasions, and so people might only look at a magazine once, although it has a longer lifespan and more people might see it. The repeated exposure for that one individual consumer is a little bit limited, and it's expensive. It's expensive to do it's expensive to buy space in a magazine. It's also expensive to produce the ad. So this just gives you an example of some different types of magazines, and in terms of their focus and specialization. Okay, so let's talk about television. And television really has changed. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon has really disrupted the not only the movie market but also the television market, and that people are no longer watching television in real time. You can DVR, and they're also producing their own content. And the other thing too is that you no longer necessarily watch TV, so to speak, on the television. Now you can watch it on your mobile devices, and so that presents a new set of challenges for people, and you don't have quite as many advertising opportunities. The other thing that we're seeing are interactive ads for that people, when they're watching certain streaming or participating in some streaming services, that you can actually, when an ad comes up, you can interact with it. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of different types of television. There's network TV, ABC, CBS, NBC, that they program to affiliate stations across the country and are under a contract. And there's cable TV, that's a different wide range of programming to subscribers through the wire, so to speak. And there's a lot of original programming. It has a tremendous amount of potential, and also for video on demand. I'm just going to switch this around a little bit. Let's see if we can get a little bit more of the screen. That's a little better. A little bit, maybe too much keyboard, but so anyways, different categories of television. There's also syndicated programs, so programs that were on at one point and then are re-aired, that other television stations buy to air. So, for example, Seinfeld is syndicated. What else would be syndicated? Friends is syndicated. You can watch them, on other. It's a rebroadcast. It's a rebroadcast, and then there's off-network syndication programs that were run in network primetime, first-run syndication, for programs that are developed for sale for individual stations, and barter syndication. So allows national advertisers to participate in national syndication. This idea that I don't want to. How could you describe it? So syndicated is it's not necessarily television programs that are geared towards one network or one television station. Okay, so let me see if I can get this just a little bit more in focus. Okay, local TV are our local stations that specifically for local audiences, satellite TV, and then web, tablet, and smartphone TV. Okay, so there are a lot of advantages to television. One is the creative opportunities. As I was saying, we not only get the visual, but you also get sound. The opportunity for repetition. You can reach a lot of people. Depending upon how big the audience is, the cost per contact can be very low. And you can have audience selectivity. So it's a narrow casting is that you have a specialized program for well-defined customers. And that really, with digitization, that's really helped us, that you can see, you can reach certain people, as opposed to just advertising. You get this really broad net of people. With narrow casting, it's a much more focused target audience. Disadvantages are that the messages are short. Television commercials are usually 30 or 60 seconds long. It's extremely expensive. Geographically, it's hard, particularly if it's a national. If you're running a national ad, you're getting all sorts of different demographics and geographic profiles across the country. The other thing too is this whole idea that the audience is not necessarily super attentive. You can flip the channel when an ad comes on. You can turn it down. You walk out of the room. Might be the time that you, whatever, are checking your phone or whatever it may be. And then also this idea of DVR, and then you can again, speed through it. And then clutter is a big issue. Because maybe when you're watching television, you're looking at something else, or you're not really paying attention at the time. Clutter is a challenge for just about every type of media outlet. Okay, so there's different ways to measure television audiences. One are TV households. That's the number of households that are in a market that own a TV. And then households using TV, that the idea that how many households of the total households are actually turning into a program for a specific period of time. And there are people who measure that on a regular basis. Nielsen, for example, does that. And that's a way to sometimes to determine rates. So this is, again, you can see this in the slides when you download them, and it's also in the book. So, how much you would pay, how much it costs per, what the price is, for a 30-second TV ad. It looks at the CW, ABC, Fox, CBS, NBC, depending upon different times of the day or night. Okay, so of course the ads the programs that have the most reach have the most expensive programming, and you're interested in the share of audience and who the program is going after. You can usually tell when you're watching a program what their audience is. So, for example, if you're watching something on ESPN, and the ads during a golf tournament might be different than the ads during football, or or during hockey or tennis. You're hitting different demographics, different psychographic profiles. You'll see different ads on HGTV versus the nightly news, versus the cooking channel, versus Comedy Central, versus the Cartoon Network. So you want to make sure that you're going after the right audience, and that the show that you're advertising on is also the same as your own target market, and that you're also going to have enough people to make it worthwhile. So let's look at a little bit of the future of television, that we're going to have more interactive TV, and looking at local content, trying to control the programming content a little bit more, and also the idea that people are selecting what they want to view. And so the challenge is really, for marketers to try to figure out a way to get into the living rooms of their, or onto the laptops or tablets of their potential customers. Okay, let's talk a little bit about radio. Radio, again, as we talked about before, is the theater of the mind, and that they really have to create a visual. There's a lot of challenges with radio. There's radio networks and with affiliate stations throughout the country. Then there's just like TV, there's radio syndication, and there's a difference between AM stations and FM stations in terms of their reach, in terms of the number of households they can get into. So AM, and then FM stations, they use different type of frequency, and it's the FM stations are much higher quality. There's also satellite radio, and then there's also internet and mobile radio. So there's lots of different options for people. So here we go. This is just a Radio Advertising Bureau gives information on radio advertising and talks about key factors and ways to guide marketers as to where the best place is to advertise. So types of advertising, there's local spot radio advertising for a specific, for local businesses. There's network radio advertising that usually looks at more national programs and national products, national markets, and then spot radio advertising. That the idea that you can put an ad into a nationally syndicated radio programming. So it depends upon, I guess the question you want to ask if you're going to go into radio advertising is, where is that show going to be playing, and are they going to be reaching your audience that you're interested in? Okay, so there's some advantages and disadvantages. The advantages certainly is cost. You can get a lot of frequency. Depending upon the station itself, you can really target your audience. It is very flexible. The development time doesn't take too long. There are some creative opportunities, particularly with sound, with voice and music, and it can incorporate well with digital because you can also the idea of the audio. But one of the biggest disadvantages of radio advertising is that the audience is not particularly attentive. The creative limitations are that there's no visual. The audiences may be not quite as cohesive as you would hope or that you would like it to be. And it's also could be a little bit, the whole situation, it's difficult to, buy through the radio. And then finally, looking at the future of radio, subscription satellite radio is a challenge. People are really prefer using that. The quality is better, and as more technologies emerge, that'll be more of a challenge for them. And then also this idea of consolidation of different radio market is a problem because there's fewer and fewer to go through. And then again, this convergence with getting radio to be more aligned with digital and social media. So that's it on chapter 13. We're going to move on to chapter 14 next and talk more about media. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you back here.